adoption. And what I'm trying to do is understand what adoption looks like later on in life, because most of the research on adoption, on adoptees specifically, stops by the end of our 20s, as though we don't have the rest of our lives going on. And it's in direct contrast to adoption practitioners, adoptive parents, and certainly adoptees who know that adoption is lifelong, but we haven't mapped it out. So we know a lot about how adoption impacts young people in childhood and adolescence, and a little bit in emerging young adulthood, but not when you're 50, not when you're 60. And when I was at the Donaldson Adoption Institute, I led a study that ended up being framed Beyond Culture Camp. And it was a national study of adopted adults looking at adoptive identity and racial ethnic identity. And we asked a really simple question. We asked the adoptee participants to look at different times in their life and tell us when, how important their adoptive identity was and how important their racial ethnic identity was. And what was really curious was that adoptive identity continued to be important to the majority of people as they continue to get older. So not surprisingly, by middle school, half of the people said their adoptive identity became important to them. But by 30, 40, 50, 80%, 90% of people were still saying their adoptive identity was important to them. So I remember us looking at that and saying, what's going on? It's not like the importance of one's adoption doesn't go away. You'd think maybe there's a resolution, but it didn't. And so those were some of the indicators that I said, we need to understand how adoption's impacting people later on in their lives. In January of 2020, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And in that same 5 years window, about 4 other of my Korean adoptee friends were also diagnosed with breast cancer in our 40s. And so that was another piece that we know from all the research on adverse childhood experiences, that those who have more adverse childhood experiences are at greater risk for physical health problems and challenges. But again, when I looked at the research literature, no one had tracked that for adoptees. So the Mapping the Life course of adoption is really seeking to understand how adoptees are aging, what are our physical ailments based on our trauma histories or adverse experiences post-adoption and in adulthood, what is our mental health? And then the other piece is really about how do our connections with other adopted people maybe improve some of those outcomes and affect us.